Welcome back, our listening and viewing audience, depending on where you come for us. This is Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrard, and we are very excited today to have Jonah Quin, the clinical director of the Broadmoor Improvement Association, with us. Just to give y'all some background on Broadmoor, the Broadmoor Improvement Association is a nonprofit neighborhood organization that serves those who live, work, and play in the community through a coordinated network of anchor institutions, faith based partners, and businesses. It was founded in 1930 and has grown in New Orleans to preserve the diverse culture and voices that form the core of Broadmoor's identity. This is a neighborhood association with an arts, wellness, and community focus rather than a security focus. Through yearly tax dollars from neighbors, the agency is able to run a food pantry, provide sliding scale counseling to individuals and relationships, run a few community gardens, help residents with quality of life concerns, put on neighborhood festivals, and host dozens of classes at the Broadmoor Arts and Wellness Center. They also rent out space to other nonprofits and educational organizations, rent out rooms to local organizations and individuals, and have a tool lending library, which I absolutely love. That is the smartest thing that a lot of nonprofits have been getting on board with. I had the privilege of being connected to Jonah through our clinical training director. Shout out to Summer Lindsay. They had been collaborating on some projects. And so we met so that we could talk about Jonah coming on the podcast. And then I talked his ear off and was late for a meeting because I was so fascinated not only by the agency, but also by his clinical work that he does, in particular couples counseling, because I just think that is so interesting. So thank you to Jonah for being here today with us. And Jonah, if you wouldn't mind, could you maybe start us off with giving us a little bit of background on your career and how you found yourself at Broadmoor?
Yeah, for sure. Just first, thank you, Sherrod and Jesse, for having me on here. Um, so, my background, how I got to my clinical work, I definitely feel like all of my life has been a lead up to it in terms of my relational and family dynamics. I definitely was some of that like adultified kid who did a lot of counseling to my family, to anyone who would listen, and growing up in New York. Oftentimes that just exuding that energy meant that a lot of houseless folks would kind of come up to me and I would talk to them and be a listening ear for them. My birth mom has schizophrenia, so I felt kind of pretty comfortable going into the deep end on folks' emotional and cognitive stuff that comes up for them from an early age. I was a server for a long time in New Orleans, and I don't know if y'all remember a restaurant called Red's Chinese, which should actually be reopening pretty soon. Anyone who hears that is probably thinking that's a joke, that's a lie. They've been reopening for 3 or 4 years, but I promise it's really going to happen soon. Um, they do stuff like cheeseburger, fried rice, kung pao pastrami. It's a really fun blend.
Oh, fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that's also another place where I'm doing a lot of the kind of emotional navigation. And while I was there, I went to social work school up at Suno. And when one of my internships fell through, I actually ended up at Via Link 211, where I had done the volunteer training. And I had a whole bunch of hours to make up on. And because Via Link has those really long hours, I was able to do that there. So I interned there, and I interned then at Bridge House, um, and in my final semester, I took what's called the EFT externship, emotionally focused couples therapy externship, which is a 4-day training that changed my life, changed my career. It felt like this incredible, like, permission. Like there's a model where everybody does what you kind of instinctually do, which is I'm super validating. I'm whatever moves people do. I'm like, I bet that makes sense. I bet you doing this hateful, cruel move, I bet there's some way in which this is your best move to navigate some emotional need. Um, and I think that that's what the training kind of set me up for. So I was really excited about that, and I stayed volunteering in the community of the EFT New Orleans, the Louisiana EFT community, but I also did not want to make the jump. I was still enjoying the server life and everything that went along with that. And it wasn't until COVID happened that I was like, okay, I'm I'm ready. I want to get into this. And then actually, I ended up having the wellness director at the time come into one of the EFT externships that I was training on. She was from the BIA, and they were trying to start a little kind of therapist incubator program. And so I came on as a part-time uh, therapist, then focused a lot on couples. And, in small nonprofits, there's just that thing where people kind of keep leaving because the pay is not quite where it needs to be and everybody's doing too much. And so that's how I ended up in the clinical director role is, lovely people kept leaving and I didn't want to leave the BIA counseling mission because it's really awesome that we get to offer these accessible services. I mean, intern client hours start at $15. So yeah,
Oh, wow.
that's some of my
Wow.
professional history. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's such an amazing resource. And apologies that if I did not clarify this in the very beginning for our out of state listeners, that this is in New Orleans agency. Very true to Via Links. We're based out of New Orleans originally as well, which is, as Jonah said, how he was with us. So just to clarify that for everybody.
Yeah, so it sounds like you do a lot of amazing work. We definitely want to dig into your career with therapeutic care and couples counseling. But first, could you highlight some of Broadmoor's programs and some important events you have coming up?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for helping me stay on target with that because I know that the BIA is very excited that I'm coming on this podcast so that I can talk about what we do and what's coming up for us. Um, So I would say that sliding scale counseling and the food pantry are probably our two most kind of visible programs that we're known for. Um, we rent out space thanks to a partnership with the church, Blessed Trinity, below us. We have this very long lease for a very good rate, and that allows us to provide really cheap rentals to other community organizations, including Community Works, which they do after school programming around town. Center for Restorative Approaches used to be a tenant of ours. Young Audiences used to be a tenant of ours. Right now, we also have the New Orleans Shotokan Academy as a tenant. Um, but yeah, counseling and the food pantry are two of our big programs. We also help out with quality of life stuff. So if you've got something going on in your block and you've already told the city about it and nothing's happening, we've got those channels to sort of push those requests further to the front of the line and put pressure on elected officials that way. We put on neighborhood festivals like Spring More and Trick or Treat More, um, which I think, kind of the obvious one, Trick or Treat More, a bit of a
Mhm.
Halloween festival for the kids. And we have a partnership where we actually staff one of the desks at the library nearby, the Rosa F. Keller Library. And because of that, we get to use their lawn space for some of these festivals, which is, Rosa F. Keller Library, beautiful building. It's an old house with that add-on of kind of a modern library area that's right where Broad, Napoleon, and Fontainebleau intersect. So we have neighborhood festivals there, and let's see. Some of the other stuff that we're doing is that we try to be canvassing every week to let people know about events, but also just kind of identify and make friends with the other folks who are really civically minded, right? With the aim of uh, trying to have more conversations among civically minded folks. Ultimately, one organization uh, is not doesn't even have the power to do much to change a neighborhood, but we can sort of make the space for the neighborhood residents to come together to affect interesting change and provide kind of awesome mutual aid opportunities. Right now, one of our partnerships is with the Office of Lifelong Learning with LSU, and they have like classes for adults over 50. I think it's something like a very cheap yearly membership, and then you can attend classes. And so Tuesdays from 10 to noon, we have a bunch of mahjong ladies hanging out, playing mahjong in the building. We've got a wine tasting class that happens. We've got a um, sort of gathering and preserving and collecting old recipes class that
Cool.
LSC, the Office of Lifelong Learning, is doing. And we've recently reduced some of our rental rates so that we can just get more folks in the building. So some of the dance crews, like the Jamettes, is a dance crew, and it's a the leader of the Gemettes is a Broadmoor neighbor. She lives on the block, and then she brings her crew to come hang out in our dance studio. Um, yeah, I think that's a pretty solid introduction to our programs. And then some of the events coming up is that on October 24th on the Rosa F. Keller Library lawn, we've got Trick or Treat More from 5 to 7, and a neighborhood meeting happening right after that. Kind of rolls into a neighborhood meeting. And then on November 14th, we've got a CEU. So that's something we also do is we provide continuing education opportunities for therapists. And it's a CEU on working with dreams. This woman, Kezia Kamenetz, she's been a dream worker for like 12 years. I know her through some kind of like back to the land projects that she's been involved in and that she has done some running of. But yeah, that's a really cool CEU for mental health therapists on the 14th. On November 21st, we've also got a CEU, also a Friday, same time, 2 to 5 p.m. on tension and trauma release therapy with Lovella Calica. It's like rooted in the sort of shaking stuff. I don't know if like somatic experiencing also does that sort of like, you find stored trauma. I know people don't love that phrase, but that in some way the body kind of like holds a bracing impulse or a
Yeah.
fight or a flight impulse, and that this is TRE is another kind of outgrowth of Peter Levine's somatic kind of research. And Lavella does these sort of like, I can't remember the name of the doctor who TRE was founded by, but she takes you through a series of stretches that sort of puts you in these positions that encourage the shaking, and
Hmm.
that she does that work with some veterans in town, and she's teaching a CEU on that. And then the big thing that I'm definitely supposed to be talking about is on November 15th we have our parcel fee vote. So like lots of places around town, lots of neighborhoods, like um, people will pay a little extra on their yearly taxes for a security district for like a car to drive around. Um, we, as far as I know, are the only non-security district. So people also, um, homeowners pay every year on their taxes. It's currently 100. We're trying to move it up to 175. And so it's the neighbors who pay for us to be able to run this building, pay for us to run the pantry, subsidize the sliding scale counseling services, subsidize the tool lending library. Um, and you meet some residents and they're like, it is so freaking cool that that's what our extra money goes to instead of a stranger driving around deciding who doesn't belong here. It's let's facilitate and pay for all these programs to help people build up a sense of belonging in the neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah, so November 15th on Saturday is the vote for that. And we're hoping that all the Broadmoor residents come out and support. Yeah.
Exercise their right to vote.
Yeah.
Um, I one am fascinated and gonna get the information for you for that November 14th CEU on dreams because that sounds amazing. And then biggest question, do you have your costume plan for Trick or Treat More?
Oh, no, I don't, but I will talk about a costume I did 2 years ago for Trick or Treat More. I was like a mad scientist sort of character,
Uh-huh.
and we had like kids kind of making potions. Potions, they were really dry potions. I had like seeds and crushed up leaves and lentils and stuff like that. And I'd be like, all right, pour in this, and we'd like have the kids like shake it up, put all your hope and love and dreams into it. And
Yeah.
that was really fun because I got really into being that mad scientist character. It was like,
Did you have a name for your character?
I did not have a name for my character. Sherrod, I think I need you on my costume consulting in the future because you're
So
asking the important questions.
all about the full picture.
Yeah. Do y'all
Uh,
have your any Halloween costumes already planned?
okay, we do, and I was very excited about it, and it coordinates with the costume that Jesse is being forced into with love. But,
Yeah.
not, but so my husband and I and our dog Mikey are going to be Wizard of Oz characters. And so I'll be Dorothy and he's going to be the Tin Man. But why we're very excited, what brings it all together is because we call Mikey the dog our potato because he's potato shaped. So we're like, he's our potato. And
Mm.
that's what brings it all together. And they have little Toto costumes where it's going to look like he's in a picnic basket. I tried to shove him into a picnic basket. He ran away. And I broke the trust with that. So we'll see. He does not like costumes either. I've been putting him in some themed outfits thus far. Um, not a fan. So I'm like, well, you got to keep it going because he's got another costume this weekend at the balloon festival. My family and I, my uncle wanted to, I still don't know why, dress up as like the pink ladies and the T-Bird. So they have a little T-Bird leather jacket for dogs. So he'll have
That's
that.
so cute.
And then his potato costume.
Potato. Yeah.
Yeah, and my wife's obsessed with Wicked, so she's gonna go as Alphaba and she's making me dress up like Glinda. I'm not really excited about it, but it's the thing you do for love.
No, you don't. You don't seem very excited about it,
I know.
but
She won't even look the camera in the eye as she talks about it.
Yeah, I'm just she was showing me outfits yesterday and she had like two like huge pink like fluffy dresses and then there was like one where like it's kind of like a suit where Glinda's into the school and I was like, okay, I can do the suit. It's still not, I mean it's still a skirt and stuff and I don't dress like that. I was like, she was like, oh, we got to get you a blonde wig and a wand and some pretty little shoes. I was like, oh, okay. I hope I, get sick or fall down the stairs. Either one, was fine with me at this point.
before you do high fem, yeah, I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah.
Now you can demand that you get like a bubble machine or something to go along with the
Yeah.
costume, and that could, but what do bubbles not make better?
Do y'all know? Sorry to go off script, but do y'all know um, Bubble Lady Linda in town?
I do not. And
Um,
Mm-mm.
she does a very sort of Glenda-y kind of presentation with a lilac wig, but then if you actually talk to her, she's like uh, very lefty politics. So she's not all um, sort of do 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 do
yeah,
airhead vibes, but she does a bubble lady persona and sets up bubbling stations for donations in City Park. She splits her time between New Orleans and Chicago. I think she's on her way back from Chicago, if not just come back. And yeah, she does just like magical bubbling experiences around town. You can rent her for parties and stuff. And
Oh, wow. That's cool.
I met her when I was working at that kind of fusiony Chinese food restaurant. So that's how I know Bubble Lady Linda.
Oh,
I love
wow.
that. That's a new inspiration.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm gonna bring us back, even though I would love to talk about nothing but costumes. So we can have another episode about. But Jonah, let's dig into your work as a therapist. So when we met, I was absolutely fascinated with your work, as you know, I would not let you leave our meeting. And but specifically work with IFS, internal family systems, and with couples therapy. So let's start first with IFS. For our listeners, could you give a description on what internal family systems is?
Yeah, absolutely. So internal family systems is actually one of those model names that you can kind of be like, oh, I get why that's what it's called. I'm glad that I sat where I sat because just above me, there's this picture that kind of gets at internal family systems. I'm gonna take it off the wall
It
to show
almost
y'all.
like Pennywise from this angle.
I know it's definitely a little spooky and scary, but you can see all of these different kind of aspects, these different parts of a
Oh,
person
wow.
Hmm.
coming out of their psyche. And so the idea with internal family systems, let's see if I can get that back on there. Yeah. Okay, that worked.
That was good. For people who are not watching, that was a very impressive, like, back bend,
Yeah.
reach back to hang,
I would
some
have
wall art
fell.
back up by Jonah.
Um, so yeah, the internal family systems is essentially this idea that everybody has within them an inner family of parts that are their sort of subparts of their psyche, and that what kind of like a healthy inner system, an inner psychic system, is that your parts they like each other, they cooperate together, they're sort of um, they each have found kind of the roles that they're comfortable with, because the sort of overly burdened psychic system involves parts that take on pain, trauma, rejection, and then other parts kind of serve as protectors. And so let's say you've got a part that's got a lot of abandonment trauma. You may and the parts that really hold the trauma are often called exiles. You can kind of think of exiles almost as emotional sponges, and it's often sort of like thought of as this kind of triangle where you've got or protectors on top and exiles on bottom, and so you've got kind of manager style protectors and firefighter style protectors. But that what protectors do is, let's say uh, that exiled part of you, that hidden part of you that has that attachment wound, uh, you may have a manager protector part that does a lot of people pleasing to make sure that you will never be abandoned, make sure that you always stay within the social bounds of acceptability, likability, so that that abandonment wound doesn't get triggered. And so navigating the inner dynamics of these parts and coming into what IFS calls the self, which is actually similar to like the Buddhist sort of higher self or DBT wise mind or flow state, that there's this kind of like calm, compassionate thing within all of us that is the place from which you can send love to these other parts of you. Uh, and one of my intro presentations at IFS, there's this like, just love yourself. And it's like, what does that mean? Right? It actually requires separating a little bit from that aspect of yourself that needs the love and coming into that wise mind, higher self sort of place so that you can send love from somewhere to somewhere else within your system. And so, yeah, in IFS, it's just a lot of navigating these internal dynamics and a lot of doing stuff like, can you let both of these urges within you know that there's enough room in your inner world for both of them?
Mhm.
And even that move right there is incredibly, it's this felt sense of expansiveness of like, oh, I get to have the part of me that overworks me, and I get to have the part of me that uses addiction and scrolling to try and soothe me. There's room enough for both of them. Uh, so yeah, IFS just it's very accepting and loving when it's done well.
That's fascinating. It sounds like a lot of, like, exploration, but, like, which can be difficult when I don't know, like, you're trying to find a space to love all the parts of yourself or have
Right.
the appreciation for them, even if they might not be the parts of yourself that you think, quote unquote, are your better parts or what have you.
Exactly, exactly. Some parts of you get all kinds of approval from
Mhm.
everywhere else, right? Your overworking part is loved at work,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and then maybe you've got a part that your doom scrolling part isn't kind of liked by no one, right? But if you can be like, hey, I get it, I get that you're doing this because it's so overwhelming inside, the world moves so fast, you're just trying to give me a break, you're just trying to give the system a chance to chill out. And very often when you send that kind of message in to parts of you that are misbehaving, it's like, oh, I never get that. That part never gets that message. So that's the
Mhm.
other thing about IFS is that when it's done well, it feels good. It has a felt sense of like good instead of maybe some other therapies where you're like, okay, this is hard, but I'm I'm getting through it, okay, I'm changing. Feels nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very interesting. What type of life transition or issues do you think IFS would be most beneficial for?
Oh, um, I think anything where there's an internal conflict, IFS does really well because it lets you honor both sides of the conflict, which is so often what people need is not
Right,
the conflict solved, but like these parts that normally are at war with each other. And some of these metaphors that we've got, it's like if you look inside, it's not metaphorical to these parts, right?
right.
You can literally see pitched battles. You can see parts hitting each other sometimes when you go inside or trying to push each other away. And so just being able to kind of get the not even just two parts, but sometimes two teams of parts that are on opposite sides of an issue to both just sit down around a big table, around a campfire, in the proverbial back patio of your mind. So internal conflicts is definitely a lot of where they work great at. And I think also for people who are navigating addiction, for people who are navigating um, overworking themselves, those are common places where IFS has a lot of value.
Yeah,
Seems like it could be good for like when you're going through like transition, like just kind of like role change transitions. Like
yeah,
maybe if you've like become a parent or even just like aging into more like your, 50s and 60s into life, where that's like such a time for so many people being like, well, who am I now? And what do I really think? Because the world's different. Am I different? What do I do now? If my
Yeah.
mom's listening, she knows I'm talking about her right now. But she is a badass about being very intentional and internal. So shout out to Kimberly again. But I think it's interesting, Jonah, like as I'm listening to you, just thinking, even like saying, like the overworking part of you, where that can be so celebrated externally, but internally, that can actually be kind of a part that's like not the healthiest and could be compensating for things like trauma or an adaptation for adversity or, something like that. Just what I'm thinking about, which has nothing really to do with my question. But what do you think might be something that is more misunderstood about IFS or parts work? And what brought you to wanting to kind of dive into using this technique?
Yeah. What is misunderstood about IFS and parts work? I think that probably a lot of misunderstandings. Actually, one of the big ones is that sort of uh, doing it can lead to like dissociative identity disorder stuff. Which is that a misunderstanding? I mean,
Mm,
I suppose it's that it one of the key premises of IFS is that we are all inherently multiple. It's not unhealthy. It's normal to be many different people inside, is sort of where your question kind of brings my mind. Um, I think also one of the things that makes it tough is that a lot of people tend to see IFS as only this like, okay, close your eyes, go in, see the part, encounter the part, and like that it's always has to be this kind of trippy, quasi psychedelic version of it. And um, that's sort of the main way that IFS looks. But also, if I work with someone and I'm like, they don't necessarily want to close their eyes and go inside and get into a meditative state. Similarly, to be like, can you just send the mess? Can you just sort of tell yourself that both of these urges are valid? That's still IFS. It doesn't always have to be this deep, trippy exploration. Although the deep, trippy exploration is uh, really deeply engaging and exciting to people. I remember when I was working with a therapist who was not quite IFS, like IFS wasn't their only thing, but they were very willing to go there with me. I would like I'm going inside, I'm having adventures with like a Gandalf part, and like, oh my god, this is just fun right
mm,
inside. Um, So yeah, that's maybe one of the misconceptions. Was there another part to that question?
Yeah, what brought you to working with
Hmm.
IFS and using this type of technique?
I think I had heard about it for trauma work, and it seemed interesting, and it's kind of gotten very fashionable um, lately. It's definitely one of the fastest growing modalities right now, um, and it got helped in its popularity by the movie Inside Out, which I think
I've been thinking
is,
about that.
yeah. I mean, the one difference with IFS versus Inside Out is it's not that each of the emotions is a part. In IFS, all of your parts can experience all the range of emotions, which actually in Inside Out 2, you see joy, experience sadness and depression. And so I'm like, oh, they are kind of setting it up to be more complicated. But I,
Spoilers, by the way.
oh, yeah. Sorry if you haven't watched it. Um, I listened to the audiobook of No Bad Parts, and I just tried one of the meditations, and it was that kind of going inside, and I encountered two parts, and it was such a like there was so much self intimacy. I was like, oh my god, yes, I know you. I've never seen you as a full image. I've never encountered you as a discrete being inside of me, but I know you, right? And the one part that I'm really talking about is Mr. Mouseman, who is a mouse humanoid who lives in my like right solar plexus, and he runs on a little mouse hamster wheel, and he's got a switchboard of emotions that he moves around, and he's like he's my people pleasing part of like
Mm.
move. And just I started crying immediately. I was like, oh my god, there you are, this hardworking part of me that does all of this stuff to try and navigate the emotions of myself and other people. And it was like, well, I can't not feel like you're there now. Like I can't go back knowing that
Right.
there's this being inside of me that's working so hard. So I was really hooked after that. Yeah.
So it sounds like not something to be entered into lightly, like be ready to like not that it whatever,
Yeah.
not that you like to
No.
be hesitant about it, but not to think that it's nothing. It's not just going and having talk therapy.
No. I do think so. I think that one of the things is like good IFS changes your life kind of whether you want it or not. So like other this is the sort of like smug thing that IFS says is that other therapies help people help their manager parts be better benevolent dictators of the system, whereas IFS is like we are trying to like get all of your parts to find the roles that they actually resonate with. So even if you've got a part of you that's sort of like functions has functioned as a manager, maybe it wants to be your artist part, and we just haven't given it the opportunity and unburden some of the trauma that makes it feel like it has to stay there. And so yeah, if you do the IFS work, like yeah, you don't always know what's going to happen when you go in there. It can be a little
Wow.
scary. Yeah.
That is so interesting. Um, and I know that we're talking about different therapies, and I know they mentioned that you do for couples therapy. We definitely want to talk about that. What brought you to your work with couples therapy?
Um, Relationship dynamics have always been super interesting to me. After I did the EFT externship in my last semester of grad school, I was super hooked. We've got a pretty vibrant community down here, although it's got some interesting fractures in it too. But attachment theory, right? That um, all of our kind of behaviors and urges are sort of can largely be explained around making sure that we maintain our attachments, our sense of belonging, our belief that I am good and acceptable as I am. That when people do really um, hard to understand moves within relationships, that it's like, no, there's pretty much always a good reason because they feel like this is their best way to maintain belonging, or this is their way to, you know, in emotionally focused therapy, one of the main things is that people tend towards withdrawing or pursuing behaviors. And in white America, that often typically maps with women in heterosexual relationships with women, typically in the pursuer role, because they're sort of socialized towards that, and men towards the withdrawer role, but it is not universal. Um, I know this is some of what we talked about, Sheridan,
Mhm.
where in the other couples therapy that you did, um, your husband's the turtle.
Yeah, it was
Is
like
that?
the turtle and the badger, which turtle's a way cuter animal to me than the badger. But yeah, that it wasn't as rude as it sounds, but just that in our communication style, like I am the one that is just more like assertive, which is not how I am with pretty much any other relationship except ours. And
Right.
that Lewis will always kind of be the more to kind of like acquiesce. And we communicate very well, but it was really helpful to like know that, to be mindful of that I don't want to be the badger nor have him go into his turtle shell. So
Mhm.
to be careful about that when, especially if it's something we're not agreeing on or that I'm just feeling super passionate about, because then I'm going to be like steamrolling.
Yeah. Well, that pursuer energy, like the way I would want to honor it in session is be like, oh my God, right? What he sees as you badgering him, I see as you fighting for change, of you ringing the alarm bell and saying, this is my love for the relationship. I want to preserve the relationship by pointing out the cracks and faults and not ignoring them.
Mhm.
Right. And for him, his move of like, this is your move of protecting the relationship and honoring your love, is that if we can keep turning down the emotional heat, we won't get in the fights that lead to the cracks. Right. And so it's just these different strategies that are both rooted in maintaining connection. Um, and that's like a lot of what, you know, just attachment science leads us to, is that like, oh, we are so hell-bent on maintaining bonds because losing connection feels like death to humans.
Yeah.
It's social isolation is nothing worse.
Well, I think couples therapy is just super interesting, and especially just when it's done well, really, really helpful and beneficial for couples. And we've seen sometimes where it's not done so well, and then that can not be wonderful. We absolutely loved ours. We saw a couples therapist just for premarital counseling, Lewis and I, just to like make sure we talked about everything before we got married. Shout out to Leslie Todd in Baton Rouge; she was amazing. But yeah, we really ended up focusing a lot on, because we'd had all the conversations basically we needed to have, thankfully, which was nice. Just making sure we understood our communication styles, and it's helped us all throughout our long year and a half of marriage. But it is truly does help us to kind of know how, like, just be able to analyze ourselves. Like if we're miscommunicating, like we're not hearing each other, where is that coming from? Because that's not really our natural state. She said we're meta communicators because we communicate about how we communicate. I just like to flex that sometimes. Um, because it has nothing to do with my question. Um, what do I think, just for my personal life, I enjoy this question because I find that when I've talked about couples counseling, even just our own experience with it, I find couples, whether they're married, dating, whatever it be like, oh, like that's not for us. We don't need that. Like it's this kind of like negative
Mm,
attribute if you have to go see a couples counselor. To me, I was like, it just helps you sort out some stuff and hear each other, which can be really difficult sometimes. So what do you think are kind of some of the bigger myths about couples therapy?
that's definitely the biggest one, I would say, is that um, you know, you need to be in trouble to go to couples therapy. It is way more useful to go to couples therapy when you're in a pretty good place, actually, because then a lot of what you're focusing on is getting really explicit and clear and reinforcing what the positive cycle is. It's like, oh, this is how y'all repair, this is how you solve things, and deepening that so that those kind of psychic channels are much stronger. um, a lot of times people come into couples therapy and it's like, you were looking at a long time to get back to something good, or to get to good at all, because sometimes couples actually don't even have a good to get back to. Um, but I will also say with couples therapy that um, you know, sometimes it can exacerbate things, right? If you're sort of like, because in EFT, like, we're aiming for that bonding, that vulnerability, and some couples don't even realize that they're like, they've been stuck in such an autopilot sort of managed pattern that maybe we start digging a little bit, and it's like, oh, this has actually been way less satisfying for both of you than you even realized, and
Yeah.
you've been putting up with it, and now it's a choice. Like, do you want to, what kind of relationship are you aiming for? Right now, most people, they do really deep down want that deeper love and connection, and sometimes that's what you end up doing in couples therapy, is sort of getting to this moment of like, oh, okay, like, you're not, you don't really want the same things, right? You don't.
Mm.
And how do we do that with love and gentleness, to be like, I appreciate what this has been, and I want to let this go sweetly and honoringly.
Mm.
Yeah.
That was really lovely. Sorry. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh,
um,
yeah.
Can I very briefly sort of check in? Uh, do y'all feel like you have a dynamic, the two of you? Because you've been doing this podcast now for a while. Do you kind of see? And I don't know if this is too much to ask. Of just like, is one of you kind of more of a pursuer when? I don't know. Also, if y'all have had much conflict or relational rupture between the two of y'all, but I think coworkers very often have these dynamics too.
I think that we work pretty well. I think that we kind of have different parts of the podcast that we're the
Yeah.
pursuer of. And this is the only part of our work at V-Link that Jesse and I do together, which I think also helps. Like,
Mm.
there's no conflict that we're going to carry into the podcast from something else. In my opinion, I would think Jesse is definitely more of the pursuer of like the kind of more like bigger like image of the podcast, and very much so on getting these like really cool guests and interviews and things like that. So I think so, but but not the pursuer in the sense that like you're bossy, because you're definitely not. But if anything, I might be the bossy one.
You're not bossy. No, we work well. What I like about us is that Shared has a lot of like clinical like aspects, and she's really, really intelligent. And she's so when we have guests or when we do talks, like it's really cool with our dynamics because like I'm like all about like people and emotions and stuff, and she's like that too, but then you have like her as the like the clinical part too, so she can bring that her expertise in, which I think helps the podcast out a lot, especially when we're talking about self-care and just different things. And I live in Tennessee, so she's in Louisiana, so she's able to have those connections in the community, which is important. And I do a lot of research about Louisiana and have to, try to be a part of it so I can, have something to talk about when they're talking about things in Louisiana. And with me, it's like not more like looking for more empathetic things. It's just like I'm like the people, like I just want to go out and talk to the people and like see what they're doing and like talk about we're the whole point of the podcast was to bring awareness to mental health and not make it such a you know, bad thing to talk about and to just bring awareness. And we talk about suicide and things like that. But I think we bounce really well with each other because she has an aspect that, like the clinical aspect. I've been in school for psychology, but I'm not licensed in anything yet, and I don't have that aspect. And she's like I said, she's very intelligent. And so with me, I'm just like, I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, let me know how your day is. Like, I'm kind of like the people person, and she does both. So, I mean, it's really cool to just work with somebody that's really smart. And like, as far as conflict, we haven't had any. I mean, like, we do discuss, like certain topics. There has been like things that we may have been like, well, that might not be the best to bring on our show right now. Let's look at other ideas. But as far as coming up with ideas and things like that and getting guests on our show, we're both very go-getters. I would say she brings a lot of interesting guests with like the clinical side, and even like nonprofits, and we always appreciate everybody coming on. Like we had like Miss Louisiana on, and that was a really good episode. Versus then we had one of our authors, our book authors that we really like, come on, and we so it's really a cool mix with both of our personalities. And I think honestly, we both have been blessed to get along so well because, like Cher said, we don't work together at all. Like, I'm on a different part of Via Link than she is. So it was really cool to like when I mentioned the podcast and they, reached out to her, they put us together there. She was like, yeah, let's do this together. And I was like, yeah, I was hoping for a partner because I was like, I like, I'm a people person. I wanted a little partner, but I didn't say that. I was just like, yeah, we could do this podcast. And we ended up, they put us together. And honestly, we met for the first time a couple of months ago, in person. And that was really exciting. But yeah, I think our dynamics work really well together, and we can communicate how we feel. And, you know, um, so it's just been great working with her. Like
Yeah.
I'm blessed. I feel every day that she decided to do the podcast because she's very busy, and I know it takes time. And she's the one that usually drafts up the interview questions, and she's just hard work. She works hard for the podcast, and never I just mentioned, hey, let's try to bring this guest on, and let's talk about this, and she does the same thing. So it's just really nice that we have that balance as well for the podcast, I think.
I think for
Oof.
both of us, it's like this is the really fun aspect of like what we
Yeah.
get to do. And so
Mm.
that helps a good balance. And I think you're right, Jesse, that I think both of our goal is the same with like we're trying to normalize topics that people try to act like aren't normal. And we have a really good balance in that like my kind of normalization is often being kind of like logical and let's talk about this like it's a we're reading it in a book and it's nothing that is that like complicated.
Mm.
And then Jesse is very much like about let's get to the humanity and always an encourager and always so empathetic to everything and everyone. So I think that balance is really cool for us.
Yeah. And I think it just works for us. Like I think it's and then like we're both very sympathetic to like, different, some of the same subjects. So it's nice to just be able to connect on that level too with our guests and even with each other. Like when we have episodes, it's just us talking about things we're going through and stuff. And we can have a conversation, and it's just so it flows very well. And we both of our I think we both have golden hearts is what I would say. Like we both just want to like help as many people as we can, and we just both really want the world to be okay and know that like we're here, like you're not alone. And that may come off as different ways that we do that, but as far as together as a team, like we rock. Like I think we do. I think we're great together, and our podcast is really great. So like I said, we've been doing it for almost a year, and it's been nothing but fun and pleasure. And it's fun just to, like I said, to get on here and just have conversations that are meaningful, and put that out there into the world so people can see, hey, this is okay to talk about, or hey, it's okay not to be okay sometimes. Like, so that's just really our goal.
Yeah.
What do you
Um,
think now of our dynamic?
well, I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about what I would have done if we were doing couples therapy or relationship therapy between y'all. I think a lot of what I would have wanted to do is really sort of highlight some of the attachment meaning under what both of you were saying, right? Like, some of this, like, we feel like a team, we feel like we support each other, we feel like we complement each other. And so I'm always trying to highlight, like, the in between, right? The sort of the thing you build in between y'all, right? And that, it would definitely, I would want to be like, oh, Jesse, you seem to have all this warmth for Sherrod right now. If you reflect on what the work has been like this past year, and I would want to just be like, all right, can you turn and share some of those things you feel warm about? Because that's the change movement, is right. Like you sort of assemble with each person, but then the real change is they turn and they talk about it. And so oftentimes there is this like maybe they can be complimentary to you, the therapist, about the other person, and then they turn and they can't. Oh, now we're starting to see some of the blocks to you being explicit about these things. Like it would be so amazing if you could right now share with your partner that you felt these lovely things, but something inside of you blocks that, right? Let's get really clear on what that block is because that's what keeps you from being able to do this at home, right?
Mm.
And um, I definitely would have paused and highlighted really early on when you were talking about Sherrod's intelligence, right? Like I would have been like, did you just see what happened on her face when you said that? That was like that's clearly something that like she can't hear enough, right? That's like that's an appreciative a place that lands really well with her. And like, can you just say that to her right now? So those are kind of some of the moves that I would have done with that
Oh.
really really lovely share that y'all did. I mean, have y'all gotten the chance to like get really explicit with each other about how much you like doing this with each other?
I would say so because we
Yeah.
do talk, like when we'd have episodes and recordings afterwards, we'll be like, "Oh, that was so great. We did so good." And like
Mm.
or like I'll send her and I'm like, "Hey, I got this guest," or she'll text me and be like, "I got this guest," and she'll like, "What do you think about this idea?" And we're like, "Oh, we rock. We're doing great. This is awesome. This is gonna be a
Oh,
fun
great.
episode." So I definitely think we both have that encouragement too with each other. And like I said, even though it's we don't work together, this was our first project together. Like I said, it's really been nice to just work with her as a person. She's, like I said, she's very she blows me away sometimes with her intelligence. Like she's really good at like explaining things on that type of level, clinically. And our guests, are, I can tell they're amazed, and they connect well with her. And me, like she said, I'm like the people person. I'm like the one over here. I'm like, oh, let me, like I just want to hug you. Like I'm just that type, and but we're both like that. It's just it comes off at different ways. But no, it's been great working with her, and I tell her all the time that I appreciate her. And she tells me all the time, like when I do the flyers, she'll send me a thing like, "Thank you so much." And when I get like the interviews, see that she's drafted the questions, like I know she's busy. So I'm like, I really appreciate you doing that for us, because if it was my questions, they would not be as clinical as they should be, or they might be jumping around because I go from like one subject to another. So no, I think we both have expressed how much we really appreciate each other, and us both putting in the work for the podcast. So it's been awesome.
And I think, Jesse, what you really bring, and I think you bring out in me more that I really appreciate, noted most when we ended up having an episode with me just stress dumping everything, is
Oh
that
yeah.
you're so willing to be open like all of the time. Open with your emotions, open with what you're experiencing. And I can tend to, especially in a professional capacity, be a little bit more closed off. And I just really love that. I think you bring that out in me more about willing to just like, because that's what the podcast is about. That's our vision about
Yeah.
like me kind of just like dumping this stuff out. You really like made me feel more comfortable with that.
And so
Well, thank
after,
you.
yeah, after a share like that, it would be like, oh, okay, Jesse, can you feel what that feels like in your body? Can you feel that warmth you're feeling? What does that make you think about yourself? What does that make you think about the relationship? And then you send it back over and then shared, oh, what's it like for you to hear how you affected Jesse just now? Shared, oh, how does that make you think about yourself that you can affect someone? View of the and it just, you can keep people in that place and they can have this prolonged deeper and deeper bonding moment that like they've been craving. And that's sort of the later work, right? The earlier work is a lot more about getting clear on what blocks them being able to navigate the stuff. Yeah.
Is
And
there
then
ever Oh, sorry, Jesse, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Is there ever I know we talked briefly about, that ideal the dog is jumping, that ideally, couples, you know, it's more helpful if you can get to couples therapy before there's like a major chasm or issue. Is there ever an instance or circumstance where you would not recommend couples therapy?
Um, so in cases where there is, right, so abuse is there are sort of contraindications for EFT, especially because it's a vulnerability bonding model. Active affairs, it's like, no, I would recommend individual counseling first. Super active addictions. Um, if people have very different aims, if one of them is like, I want to leave, and the other one is like, I really want to stay, there's something called discernment counseling that is a little more appropriate. Um, and then uh, abuse, and this is a big controversial one in couples therapy.
Mm.
Abuse is a, a word that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think simultaneously, I want to say that abuse is awful, and also that abuse is much, much, much more common than people talk about, and that not just physical abuse, but I don't remember what the statistics are, but it's something like 50% of couples that end up in couples therapy have had one or more instances of physical abuse. And very often they don't talk about it and they don't bring it up to their therapist. But there's a difference between what's called intimate partner terrorism, which is the sort of cold, coercive, controlling behavior. And then there's sort of more of this, uh, I hate to say it, but abuse that's more rooted in love. And the way that I was, one can say there's no such thing as love and abuse. I just I went to a training with these folks who had been working with couples that emotionally and physically abuse each other for decades, and they were like, "There's no there is," and the way they brought it up is they were like, "What happens when your kid goes or your grandkid runs and goes to touch the stove, and you grab your hand away and you start screaming at them? You start emotionally abusing that kid in the name of love. You are mad at one part of them for endangering the whole of them, right?"
Mhm.
And I thought, I have a little nephew, and when he ran out into the road onto St. Claude Avenue, and I flipped out at him, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it. That there are these moments where that kind of thing happens, and then emotional abuse is just like it's like it's I think it's better to think about abuse more like we talk about racism, where we're like, oh yeah, I'm as a white person, you're gonna do racist things, and it doesn't mean that you're malicious or malevolent, and we should focus on the behavior and what anteceded the behavior and not get caught in the shame of I'm a racist as this overarching label. I think that there's kind of similarly, that's the way we should talk about even some abuse stuff, where it's like, um, you engaged in an abusive action, right? Let's not focus on whether or not you're an abuser. You have been harmful in some relationship in your life to someone. Everyone has.
Right.
And so couples come in and like, it's like, yes, that action does fit some of the technical definitions of emotional abuse. Um, and that is not the moment to be like, and now the therapy changes and we both shame you. We're like, okay, you when you scream and you yell, it's because you your body has tried to be soft and gentle before and it doesn't work and you don't get talked about at all, and you need to be heard and you need to be noticed, so you get louder and louder. And yes, it scares your partner, and we want to be real about the cost of that because maybe you're a bigger man and they're a smaller woman, and we don't want to um, fall into the shame trap of saying you're a bad person because you did this. We need to go to that place of, it makes sense why you did that, and here are the costs, and wouldn't it be cool if you could have a different move there, right? And sort of dangle that different opportunity.
Yeah. So like identifying the action rather than like labeling the person.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a therapist, what do you find to be the most challenging part of your role in the helping relationship?
I think with couples, a lot of times I get pretty close. I get in love with their love, and that can sometimes keep me from doing the good pulling back and being like, okay, here's what's happening. Let's just get into the observer role. I also have an enormous. It's not imposter syndrome. I have the oh my god, I'm doing harm. Oh my
Mm,
god, I'm doing harm, which makes me freeze, and as opposed to doing that move of like, hey, I think I just did something that wasn't cool. Let me own that. Let's talk about what that was like, and then let's get back to the work. You know,
Right.
fear of harm, big. Yeah.
That's my turn to ask the next question, but I got it stuck in my head. Remembering I still beat myself up for saying the wrong thing when I was an intern in grad school. It was, ugh, so awful. But and it's really, I know what it was, just one of those, I'll tell y'all because now I'm making it sound worse than it was. But I was, when I was first working with my first survivors of suicide loss support group, which is what I still do clinically. But I was an intern, and at this group at the time, we used to kind of do like have coffee and stuff before the group starts, just in the coffee room that was in that building. And then the facilitators would go meet for like 5 minutes right before the group started, just to touch base on if anyone new was coming, etc. So I was having coffee with some of the group members, and then I needed to get up to go meet the facilitators, and my legs got all like tangled up in the chair. And I started falling over, and I was like, oh, if I can get out of here without killing myself. And then I was like, I cannot believe that just came out of my mouth. And that was a decade ago. And I still like, I'm like, oh my gosh. Um, but
Yeah. Yeah.
these are the things. And nobody, and they, I mean, and it's one of those things where it's like everybody that heard me say it knew that was not, I wasn't
Hmm.
talking about killing myself. I meant that I was going to fall over and hurt myself. But it was so just like, oh my goodness, that is such a, that was not cool. So going away from my trauma, what are some of the more rewarding scenarios that you experience?
I always tell this one. And this was actually with a couple that did not. We kind of had to. I had to take a step back, and we haven't actually reconnected. So I'm not saying that like I helped them deeply. Definitely, you get a text of a couple eloping. That's incredible.
Mhm.
And they're like, "Thanks, we couldn't have been here without you." There was this one, and I haven't really asked their permission to tell this story, but I don't give any identifying information. So I hope if somehow they ever see this, they just know that this is me honoring them. Of like this couple in high conflict, and one of them being like, "Oh my god, like we broke through a conflict," and they were like, "I just had a vision of us in an old folks' home, like banging into each other's walkers, just like teasing each other that way." And like, that person's crying, and it's like, okay, I'm crying too. Like this is, I am in the romance movie. I am there.
Yeah.
um, and that's one of the really high moments for couples therapy. And then for IFS and individual therapy, similarly, like someone encounters a part, an inner child of theirs, and they just freaking hold it and love it and just sing to it. And it's like, well, yep, there I am back in something that is just like mainlining love.
Yeah. Mm.
Oh, that's sweet. I love that. Um, and we're huge on our podcast. We talk about self-care. Given the toll your career can take on you, even though it is filled with passion, how do you balance your own self-care, and what are some of your go-to self-care activities?
I mean, the first honest answer is I balance things poorly. um, I'm totally like, oh wait, I don't have any more sessions. Let's keep going with the couples therapy. Like we just got somewhere good. I love this. I get way too like deriving too much ego, identity, and strength from work. That's a pitfall of mine for sure. Um, Probably one of the most effective ones is there's this jazz drummer in town, Herlin Riley, and if I can catch one of his shows and just I'm in the seat, and like people saw me, it's like I look so goofy. I'm just dancing so hard in the seat, like my knees are just like, and I'm like pretending to be the drummer and yeah. So that's probably the most effective place for me. Yeah.
I like that.
So speaking of the balance, would you, Jonah, be able to highlight again just some of the exciting events that y'all have coming up at Broadmoor?
Yes, absolutely. Um, Big one, Friday the 24th, Trick or Treat More, the Halloween event, 5 to 7 p.m. Neighborhood meeting to follow. Um, Also, the CEUs coming up November 14th. We've got the Working with Dreams CEU. November 21st, we've got Trauma, Tension and Trauma Release CEU, 2 to 5. And these are all on the Broadmoor Improvement website. And then November 15th is the big one, that's when voting day is for runoffs in New Orleans and for our parcel fee. That is our very existence is on the line with that vote right now.
Well, you have a lot of exciting events coming up. Also, what is the best way for people to reach out to you or learn more about the Broadmoor Improvement Association?
So www.broadmoorimprovement.com. And then for wellness services, it's wellness at broadmoorimprovement.com. So if anybody wants to reach out for counseling that way. And again, I'll just real quick plug, uh, we even have, although they're probably about to graduate, so when we've got them, interns see couples for as little as $30 an hour. Um, Interns start with individuals at $15 an hour. Licensed staff starts for individuals at 35 an hour and starts with couples at 60 an hour. Um, and all of those rates are, you know, they're really accessible.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jonah, we would like to thank you so much for being with us today. We will link those
Hmm.
websites in the description of the episode. Please reach out to Broadmoor if you're in the area. Please go vote if you're in the community. Thank you, Jonah, for being here, for having some real talk with us, for having some almost couples therapy with us. That made me just
Yeah.
feel good about us. But we really appreciate you. Jesse, are you ready to try our sign off?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, this has been Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrod. No
No
filters,
filters, no
no fluff,
fluff, just
just
real
real
talk.
talk.
Oh, we got it.
We got it.
Yeah, you did.